Okay, my name is Matt Robinson. I'm the founder of AI Street, which is a publication all about how AI is impacting financial services. I'm joined by Atta.
So I'm Ata. I'm the co-founder of AnalystAI. We are building AI analysts for investors. I focus on private markets, alternatives, which is also my background. I did private equity about 8 years in New York and later in Asia. So we mostly build for private markets, but I think in today's exercise, I'll do a public market example so that there's no conflict of interest. It's also a fun way to learn agents.
So maybe actually you can talk a bit about how you started your company, just because
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting way into it.
I was normally based in Asia. I lived in Vietnam past 4 years. I was investing in Singapore, Korea, Vietnam, Indonesia. I used to work at a fund called EMP Belstar SuperFreeze. They do cold storage investments in Asia. While I was working with them, AI happened, and I already knew coding a little bit. So I was taking some code academy courses to improve my coding. And when ChatGPT happened, I was like, okay, this is cool. I can use it in my tools. I can improve my coding. The moment I started using it, I was completely astonished because it could really do the desktop work part of, I think, private equity. So in any investment process, part of it is market research, part of it is due diligence, part of it is documentation. You need to write the IMs and build decks, why this deal is good, why this deal is bad. That's really information heavy. You need to process information, read, talk to people in the industry and collect asymmetric information. That's important. But also there's this huge desktop work part where you need to find reliable sources that supports your thesis, and you need to map the market supply, who is building, who is doing, what customers they have, how big is their facilities. And honestly, that work is very manual. It's analyst level work. They collect information, or you hire consultants who do the same. They extract information, package it in a PDF, and sell it to you for, let's say, 50K, 100K in Asia, probably a couple hundred K in US. So I realized I can do that much faster with AI. I used it while doing market research, mostly for public data, because every fund is very skeptical about using it for their private data. But as I use it, I realized it's really helping us. And we came to a point where I built a tool internally and the output was used when we were doing a deal. And I said, okay, this is the moment. This is clearly useful. Even my team who used to joke with me, calling me AI guy, oh, look at our AI guy. Even they came to a point where they were like, okay, this is cool. Can you do this? Can you do that? And at that point, I said, you know what? This is something to bet on. And that's how I jumped into it. So I'm a actually investor. I am not fully a technical guy. I can code a little bit. So I think the listeners should bear that in mind. If some engineers watch us, they'll criticize us hardcore, but I can at least put my investing ideas into code, and that helps me, let's agree on the flow and the agentic outputs, which I believe helps us ship better, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think it's practical. Right before this, I was telling my wife, "What are you doing tonight?" And she's like into the space, but like agents is still foreign. So that's the reason I reached out to you. What does this actually mean? If you want to share your screen and go from there?
Yeah, let's do that. We discussed doing a product on a public markets and
Sure.
testing it, let's say, with
Yeah.
a project. Let me share my screen. Before we start, let's brainstorm a little bit and talk about what the agents are and how we will create the flow. If you try to code right away, it doesn't work, per my experience. The first thing is, we said we'll focus on public markets. So I'm going to come here and I'll say generally public markets. And we'll also try to define what the agent is. Per my readings and understanding, when I think about an agent, let's say the input we have is 10Ks of a company.
Maybe you could just start with what's the screen we're looking at here? Is this
Oh,
yours?
this is just this Excel draw. I like it. You can draw the flows of how a product should work. I generally use this because agentic flow or agents, it's really important that you set the flow of information correctly. So in engineering, I think typically you do if A happens B, B happens C, and you can imagine what the B and C is. When you click on that, this website happens. But when you're coding with LLMs, what if the output is not as you like? You tell the LLM to, hey, analyze this 10K and extract the financials, but what if the financials are not good enough?
Right.
Maybe you need to add something else to that flow. That's why I focus on how the agents interact first before coding anything. In our case, we said we'll look at short opportunities in public markets. I think it's an interesting topic. How I would do it, and let's brainstorm together. You should comment as well. Probably I would look at first news in past 3 months. And obviously, you don't want to look at all the news. So I would scrape a lot of news on the web, and I'll use a tool like Surfer as an input. We need some keywords. I'm going to look for negative news, okay? News, let's say scandals and other opinions. in negative manners. So this means we will release, let's not call this an agent. This is just you're going to web and extracting information, right? Once you scrape the news, let's say you have the news data here. So the way agentic flows work is you can do it in two ways. One, you have an agent that looks at these news and immediately decides what news are interesting enough for further short research. In this one, it's making a decision, right? The way I will try to do in today's exercise is I'm going to do it very step by step, but the ideal agent should decide what is the news that are interesting enough for short and immediately do a follow-up research, okay? So the value of the agent is honestly, instead of you prompting second time to ChatGPT, it already acts. That's what an agent is. It can decide for you. Before I create that agent, I generally do it very manually, step by step, to see if agent decides correctly or not. Once I agree that it can decide correctly, I will merge the two. So I'm going to force agent to decide interesting, and then agent will list of companies to research further. These are the ones we want to focus more because you cannot go very widely to the web. Once it decides on the companies, I will go to one general news about that company. Just I want to know more. And secondly, I want to go to those companies' SEC docs or investor relations docs. They will have way more documentation. You cannot short just based on news information, right? That's very naive. So if I go to 10K, what would I want to do? So you'll have, let's say, 10Ks, maybe 10Qs, maybe some 8Ks. And these are, let's say, hundreds of pages, right? Initially, we will test it for a single company. We will not look for 20, 30 companies. We should not scale. We should not scale before we set the flow. Ideally, we just do it for one company and see if we like the result. Right. Once you agree on the flow, it's very easy to replicate it. You can replicate it for 20 other companies. You just run the same code, but you need to agree if you like the outputs. Once I get the 10Ks, they are very long documents. I'll do is I will split the pages. I like splitting into pages because you can check the information quality better. What I mean is, let's say you have a 200-page document, you ask AI, hey, find information that seems to be negative. I plan to merge the news into the 10Ks later. I want to say, read the 10Ks and read the news. Do you see anything based on the negative news that could affect this company negatively, and check the 10K to verify it? Do you see, for instance, if the news says Trump tariffs will affect this company negatively, I ideally will then ask AI to look at each page and see if you see dependence on China imports. Obviously, I hope he figures out the China, but occasionally I may need to do a knife. So I will.
And you do that, for improving accuracy.
Yeah, totally. Because, for instance, the reason I split it into the pages is each page, it's very easy to tag. This is page 1 of this document, page 2 of this document, and then later I will have an agent. I like to go one agent, one purpose, whose only goal is to look at every page and combine an answer. So the way this will work is I'm splitting into pages, and now let's say I have many pages here. I'm just gonna do it like this for people to envision how it could look.
And why do you like to have one agent per task?
Because based on the research I read, based on my personal experimentation, based on the vibes, I think the more purposes there is, the more they get confused. I think really important to clarify a few things. Best practices in my experience. One, always give less data than more data. I think there was a paper showing that above 3,000 tokens going up. Because it's just, as I think of it as a human, do you understand 100 pages at once? You probably don't, but a paragraph you can really understand well. And in my test, this works. The second is, whenever I try to have the AI agent does more than one thing in a single API call, we call it agents, but these are API calls that take something and just, instead of just giving an answer, decides and acts again, right? So that's what makes it an agent. The more purpose you give, the more, I think, it just mixes it up. It doesn't give the output correctly. When you are doing agents, you do function calling as well. You're calling another agent to do something. It's not really reliable at calling the function because it's not sure which one of the functions are suitable here. So generally, one purpose is good, and making it super clean, simple is good. And just then combining these single agents into one is better than having one agent do multiple things, in my experience.
And then is it easier to see if there are any issues?
Exactly. So I love that as well. So Also, the reason I do page by pages, I'm going to have the agent look at each page individually before combining the answers. This is more compute heavy, but you can use like Gemini 8 billion, which is like 4 cents for 1 million tokens. Throw the compute at it, right? It's also better than RAG because when you do a retrieval augmented generation, you can only get chunks of 100 pages. So again, my drawing is not so good, but let's say we did RAG. The RAG has many pages inside, right? When you ask a question about, hey, check this news and find relevant information, it's only gonna pull these two, and then it's gonna say, you know what, this is my answer. There is an issue here. But the right way, I think, as an investor to look at it, you don't want to miss what is here if there's more context. So the way I try to do this, I'm gonna have all the pages here, and this agent will look at each page one by one.
So you're not even using RAG at all?
No, in this one, we will not. Also, I think it will take more time. We need embeddings, this and that. This is the simpler one. It will work, hopefully. Once I have outputs for each page, the cool, in my experience, again, we use this similar approach in other things. In most pages, it will say no answer, okay? But in some pages, it will say, there is this info that works, okay? So in next step, I will basically take these inputs again. This is going to be the same agent, but recursively, I'm gonna have it look at all of this again, but in chunks of 5 or 10, because now I'm shrinking the data. So there's 250 pages, let's say. I went through all of the pages. Now I know everything that needs to be known in that document about this thesis I'm working on. In most of them, there's not relevant information. I don't want to miss anything. If you choose 250 chunks, you basically do the same. You pull 250 pages. In this step, I will do 5 chunks of 5 so that I shrink the data and keep the information reference to the pages so that I know where the information came from. So ideally, the final result will be for few news. And by the way, we'll need some work here. We need to create some thesis out of this. I'm going to check them in each of the 10Ks, 8Ks, and there will be results. And it will need to do some prompting here. AI views on this specific thesis with page sources, okay? I realize we need to do one thing. This part is most important before you start coding. You have to figure it out along the way. So for instance, the news.
Is this something that you learned as you were doing it?
Yeah, I wasted so much time. It's like the snake game, you go this way. I already did it thousands of times, so people are benefiting from that failure. I never worked in a software engineering team or anything, so everything I figured out myself. But interestingly, this works well for designing flows for agents. I think the best way to look at agents and agentic behavior is you want to get to the output of the human. In most cases, if you follow the same input-output flow of a human, it works out really well. Later, you can optimize it. As an investor first, you receive a teaser. When the teaser comes, you go to the web, search a little bit, look at the competitors. If you're interested, you will basically go on to the next stage. You want to get the CIM. Like all these steps, it's better than trying to recreate the flow, just what the human does. So one thought here is, maybe we'll have a lot of comments and later we can open source it and improve too. When I read the news, probably I need an agent to, I will call it create ideas for testing agent. Because news are one thing, you need those news ideas to turn into something. And the output of this one, this is a single API call. Let's not call it an agent, but this is basically going to give me a list of ideas in the market, okay? And then I think I will go to, I'm checking here, news data list of companies. These ideas I need to combine here. Agent looks at thesis at every page. For each page, it looks at it, gives an output. I think this would work probably. I created a code base for us. Can I move you here? I shared this screen, but maybe I stop and share another screen.
Sure. I'm just making sure that when Zoom records, it records the screen you're sharing.
Yeah, that's okay. So I'm gonna get this GitHub. Okay, so you can see my screen. I just created this for us. And this is an empty repository. I'm gonna use Poetry for package management.
For folks who are not coders,
package management is a big issue. You need to create a Poetry whenever you're adding a package. You use Poetry so that package management is so easy, and the next guy who opens your code base can just do Poetry install. That's generally best practice because otherwise it gets really messy very quickly. I'm going to do this step by step in the beginning, but my coding team loves this more as well, because otherwise my ideas are much harder to explain. Do the flow step by step for them so that they exactly know what is the input output relationship, and then they productize it. So the first step we talked about was we'll need to go to web, right? We'll need to read the news a little bit. We just want to know what's happening in the market. And actually before that, we need to decide on some prompts to go to web with. So I'm going to say web search prompts, UI, and I'm also going to do web search, okay? For web search, we will use Serper. So go to Serper, sign in. Serper is a Google Search API. You can use it easily. And the benefit of it is whatever you send to Google, it does the same, but it can also scrape the results a little bit so that you save time and you don't need to.
You're not getting everything.
Yeah, you'll still get a lot. It's just you will not get everything within a website because you are limited to what the Google results show. Okay, so I got my Serper, and now let's set up a prompting structure. Let's go to Gemini. I'm going to use Gemini just because it's cheap and I like their long context window. So Gemini documentation. Let's go here. Text generation. Let's just get this one. Okay. So I'm going to put it here. Oh, let's take it here actually. I'm going to keep it very simple. I'm going to say use the API doc. I'm using Gemini experimental 1206. It's a very good model for coding. Use the API doc and create 10 questions to search negative news about companies in US stock market in 2024, let's say. I always ask, and I also have my settings here to tell it how to write the code. I always force it to explain first so that I know what it's exactly doing. It generated some prompts and I'm going to say, okay, yeah. So it's writing the questions. And then I will generally change this. So let's look at it. Which companies face major losses in 2024, this and that. And I'm going to say, save the outputs in a JSON queries for Google. Yeah. I use JSON because I don't want to create a database right now. If you create a database, you have to spend a lot of time connecting to the database, updating it. I think it's unnecessary. The goal here is to decide on the flow. I'm going to run it. Did I activate the poetry? Let's see. Yeah, I think it's still running. I'm going to activate the poetry shell as well. Actually, that's the better practice. And I have Gen AI pip installed, but in the poetry, I have to do it. Poetry add, was it Google Gen AI? I'm going to stop this one. And
you can add more questions if you want.
You can completely change how the question step happens now. So I'm going to do poetry add. I'm going to say no to this. I will say take my API key from .nv Google API key. I'm trying to not show my API key to you guys so that you don't exploit me. Let's run this. Oh, I'm going to terminate this terminal because I want to use the poetry shell. It's all the Gen AI and everything I downloaded. It's in this virtual environment. It makes package management easier. Select interpreter. Let's do this. Python 0 web. Boom. This is one issue sometimes happens. I guess I probably didn't do the poetry really well or the interpreter choice. Python is very sensitive to this stuff. You got to basically pay attention how you built this. If there's an issue, I think I can fix it fairly quickly, but let's see. So I'm also going to check another code base I was working today. Ah, it worked. Okay, cool. It misunderstood here. Let's fix this actually. It generated, as you can see, and tried to generate answers to the questions, which is not what we are asking for. Let's do this. Generate 10 questions to search US stock market news. We are interested in short opportunities. Let me generate the questions. Okay, so now it generated some questions. It didn't do it really well, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to tell it, take my prompt to instruct AI to give answers in JSON format. Do not use JSON or in the beginning or end of the answer. And do unique ID for keys and values are the questions. I'm just trying to describe how to give the output right now. mistakenly, sometimes when you're creating a JSON, it adds some, let's say, unnecessary stuff. So let's see if it will get this. Boom. Okay, it created a JSON here. Honestly, this could be done much better, but by the way, I want to change this to this because this is the first step. This is the second step. And I'm gonna do actually, let's go here. Okay, cool. So this is now almost like a JSON structure. It's not perfect. It adds this stuff to the end, which I don't like, which makes it hard to process it as a JSON. Unfortunately, sometimes we have to deal with that. What I'm gonna do right now is try to set up a Serper infrastructure. I'm going to use one of the, I think I had an old document I can repurpose. So Serper will help us, window. It will help us basically do the web search fairly quick and just get output results from them. Give me a sec. In this part, we are seeing the disadvantage of not being super prepared for this. But
I think it's instructional either way. And you bounce around between different LLMs based on the task, right?
Just this one. Let's use this repository. Give me a sec. Clean it up. Damn, I have so many repositories right now. So summary. Okay, got it. Perfect. Web search. Cool. I'm just gonna copy this. We need to change a little bit because the answers, I'm gonna take it and let's use Anthropic 3.5. Update the script. Input questions will come from this one. And we save the outputs into this repository, into the same directory as Serper results. Generate 10 questions within a JSON format. Do not add JSON to the beginning or to the end. Just list 10 questions. That's it. These questions are about US stock market news, and we are interested in short opportunities. Nice. So I'm going to run this again. Serper results. See, this is the issue with the JSON structure. Unless it is super clean, it will not understand for parsing. So maybe I will do text version as well here. Text. Save the output as text. One question.
And this may be a dumb question, but when you're using JSON, you're taking some of the unstructured stuff and trying to structure it.
Yeah, it's normally easy, but I honestly didn't do in a while this one. So generate 10 questions, and I didn't clean it super clean. So I'm being lazy to write the right code. So it has to, I need to write either prompt should be so good that it cleans this up. So it's a JSON, or I need to write some regex code to clean it up, which I had in the past.
But I'm saying more like, for someone like me, it's like I've done a little bit of this. And like I was trying to understand with JSON, it's like you're taking that unstructured kind of information and trying to format it in the proper way. And that's
because it's basically like a database. If you think of it JSON, or structure wise, it's super clean, but it takes a little bit more effort. This assume questions are separated by new lines. Separate questions by new lines. Okay. So I got the 10 questions here. Let's see what happens here. User data path. Because of my old, in the previous data, it's trying to get the information from here. User data JSON, process all queries. So let's look at it. This takes script directory, queries path, and user data path. And I'm checking. We do not have user data path unnecessary. So in the previous one, that uses user data as well. That helps me do market research.
Gotcha.
This one, it's not relevant.
And you're just asking the LLM for help, coding help.
For sure. Because I'm not a great coder.
I use it all the time for writing, for just how can I save this in fewer words, or is this clear?
What is the issue? You are encountering a JSON decoding error, which means what is the root? But attempting to load parse. No, that's a text file. Not use JSON. Let's run it. Now it's getting some answers. Serper results, document. So now it is finding some stuff from Reddit as well. So you have to think about where you red flags in the stock market to watch, West Advisory Group, investors.com, ETFs and funds. I always note down what kind of improvement you can do when you're working on this flow. You need to be more specific about what kind of questions you ask or which websites you go, right? So I'm going to add it here, limit which websites you go to. Okay, so now we have it for 10. I'm going to have in the next step and basically LLM review and find thesis. This one will look at the data we scrape from these websites. We need to scrape the data because we need to have it read, right? Let's call it scrape actually. Scrape UI. So I'm gonna repurpose a code I have from previous one, JSON file path, relevant links. In this one, JSON, but we have each file. Actually, maybe I can get this data too. Wait, let me try this. So because we have the links there, we need to extract them first. I'm gonna put it here. So this one will go through and try to extract all the links and then eliminate TikTok, Amazon.com, which are not super relevant. We will clean the links, base directory, output pile path. Test the links under circle results. There is a folder for each question. And JSON files, circle results, links data, link scrape. Yeah, that didn't work out. So I need to extract the links because the output we get has a lot of stuff, right? Not only just the links. So I need to extract the links from there. This is clean links. Okay. Server results, output directory links. Let's see. Okay. I got the links now. These are the ones I will take into the next step to scrape. And there is, let's say, 300 lines, so maybe 30 links here. Let's go to scrape and scrape results, links to scrape, copy relative path. Let's see if this works. No, the list object has no expected items. And also this is not root. So again, I'm using some of the legacy code. It's gonna give some issues like this occasionally. This is my JSON structure, extract links and pass to scraper. By the way, these parts, it seems like boring because you are just doing manual work.
There's an AI software called Descript. It does it
Yeah.
automatically.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool, actually. It like figures out like what it can even, you know how you see on Instagram and Reels? I can do it automatically now. You don't even need to pick it out.
Okay. So now it's starting the scraping. Let's see the results. So the results are coming. In the ideal scenario, if you look at the flow we designed, we are just doing this step now, the first 2-3 steps. Obviously, you can improve the quality a lot here. What kind of information you get? Maybe short ideas. You follow someone on Twitter and want to see what that guy says, right?
Once it's in place, it's pretty easy to change things. You want more of this or less of that.
There's a lot of seeking alpha. Some of them are duplicate, or maybe they just start this way, the same document, but we'll see. So we got, let's say, 50 articles, right? And then we need to review these. I'm going to use, I think, 1.5 Flash. And let me think, what did we say for the design here? We said we scrape news data. When you're coding, you realize the things you need to do in more detail. How do you decide what is interesting? In this step, we'll have the AI look at each article, and from each article, it will extract 3 ideas and explain why it thinks those are interesting and the reasons for that.
It's wild that they can do that.
Yeah, they can do a lot of stuff. So I'm going to use, I have a Gemini code process here, so I'm gonna copy it to go faster. Okay, so let's treat this. I'm gonna say, let's update this code such that 1, we go to results, and under it, we take each text file. Pass the text file to the LLM as content. We ask the LLM to review the news, which is about US stock market, and find 3 investment ideas. We are interested in, we can share both short and long. We are interested in interesting thesis that we can use in our investment goals. Make sure that when the ideas are generated, you explain the reason and what in this article supports it. And also create 3 questions to search further to improve your confidence or invalidate the thesis. And then we do it for each text file, save the outputs under a folder called 3 article news to idea with each output saved. I think this is fine. Let's press. So when it's using a legacy code, sometimes it can get confused, honestly, but it will save us. If I were to write all of this by hand, not that I
Right.
well, but it would have taken us so long. I like Gemini 1.5 Flash because it's much faster. You can parallelize this later because we are doing everything one by one. You can do it all in parallel, so it becomes much faster. The timing shouldn't scare people. It's going to be much faster. Okay, so let's run this. Mapping X. Okay, the reason is I need to add, we are under Matt agents. Yeah, let's do. Okay, so now it's starting. And the results, where does it save? Let's see. Okay, it's saving them here. Wait, the contents are not passed correctly. There's a debug. Ensure contents are passed correctly. Let's do it this way. Use absolute path. Text files are here. Logging to show the first 200, 400 characters of the text file passed to the prompt. You got to check, of course, like sometimes I probably didn't set something correctly here in terms of how I take the text files and pass them into the prompt. So I see the content is missing here actually. So clean text file. Let me see. Content. Yeah. Update the path handling. Get the duplicate function definition. There are 2 versions of load JSON get file.
And when you're doing that, you're just applying their recommendations?
Generally, I look at it roughly. These are so simple things for them. This stuff it can do because the template is already there. Or just specifically tell it to do a specific part. But I think AI is pretty good at doing single scripts. So I'm doing everything page by page. A very good software engineer probably is smart enough to do all of them at once in a single function. But I think AI fails there. That's why they say it's not as good. But for my purpose of creating the flow, generally works fine. Okay, so I can see the first 400 characters. There's some news information we are correctly passing now, right? This time the results will be better, but I have some old data. Let's see. Great. I can see in the bugs that I am passing it. Saved analysis for first 400 characters of clean content. Okay, wait. So let's come here. Sometimes the funny thing is you need to debug it yourself. And you cannot depend on the AI. In process article, why content is passing content correctly. And notice that content appears faded in idealize because the string formatting in the prompt is not using the correct syntax. Okay, I spoke Turkish a bit because I was angry. I didn't do the F string.
You can teach those too. Actually, I had to learn those in Italian.
So you gotta, when you're passing something into the prompt, you gotta do an F string, and there wasn't an F there. So that's why it wasn't passing anything we did. So I'm gonna delete all of these and redo. Let's press this. Let's see if this is working this time. And now it's much slower. Okay. So it's slow because it is trying to
understand the content.
Now we are getting some results. Consistently strong free cash flow. Okay. First, I'm gonna stop it. I realized I need to improve the prompt because it's talking in BS. Increase in investing companies constantly strong free cash flow. Duh, like. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna give a lot of, let's say, ideas, guidelines. You're not interested in general terms like invest in companies with good cash flows. That's garbage. We want specific ideas, insights. For instance, a catalyst that changed something in the market, similar to AI markets affecting NVIDIA.
I always like companies that beat estimates. How you read those, oh, they've raised their dividends 20 quarters in a row or something like that.
As a short opportunity or?
Yeah, just because it's like eventually like, all right, how can this continue to go? Do you know what I mean? You would think that's actually what got GE in trouble a couple of years ago with their accounting because they kept like, God forbid they didn't raise their dividend.
Mm. Yeah.
It's a little, I think probably a little too much for this, but yeah, like for this thought, this is
Also,
like a thought experiment.
that also requires understanding financials, and I think understanding financials is a bit harder for LLM. Yeah, gotcha. So I'm gonna give a lot of feedback there, and if I don't like what it does, by the way, just for the record, right now we didn't do anything. We didn't create an agents. We created agentic behavior. We didn't create an agent yet. The agent will do all these like on the fly. It will decide itself. Right now, I'm just creating the flow for agent to think. Once we agree how the flow goes, then you will basically create some function calling where agent will just call this function after it called the function to search the web and so forth. Okay.
I think it's a good exercise because it's like you're refining it as you go along.
I play with all of the steps so much. That's why I believe it's hard to replicate what you do. It's cool for investors because if you are building your own tooling or if you have a company built only for you, I think it's hard for anyone else to replicate this. Maybe we do another session to make it cooler. The goal is we'll write so much in prompts. It's hard to fully copy the same thing.
Payoff for this grant, it's only been an hour. We're doing things that was not possible 5 years ago.
Oh, totally.
Like the idea that you could get a bunch of ideas, as we talked before, investors don't need a million ideas. They need a handful of good ideas.
Totally. And they need those ideas to be filtered. So I just had another idea. I'm going to have AI create this. Then we will have a lot of results. And then I'm going to have another agent look at all of, we are going to do something cool. We'll do, let's say, like Monte Carlo simulation. We will look at 5-page results and decide which one is the best to go to the next stage. And then we're going to basically streamline the ideas. And in then, let's say we'll have 2-3 ideas. So I added some prompts.
That's interesting.
Just because I didn't like their results. So invest in companies with strong historical cash flow. The article highlights the limitations of relying. So this one, I need to work on the prompts a little bit more. Low P ratios. This article wasn't useful. This is garbage. It will be eliminated in the next one. So let's look at this. Invest in companies that benefit from a potential decline in consumer spending due to inflationary pressures caused by Trump's proposed tariffs. Moody's chief economist highlights the risk of broad-based tariffs leading to higher prices and potentially higher inflation. If inflation rises significantly, consumer spending could decrease, shifting demands towards value-oriented products and services. Companies that provide essential goods and services that discounters do well in bad economy times because their spending is inelastic. So this can be something that you dig further. Invest in defensive sectors, utilities, consumer staples. And don't forget, it uses the information it read on this article. So it's biased by what that article says. Therefore, we'll see a lot of different directions. Short or hedge against companies heavily reliant on international trade. Of course, you want to get more specifics, but and it says what percentage of target companies' revenues come from exports or imports from countries affected by the proposed tariffs. Ideally, the agent you create in this step can do web search, which is relatively easy at this point. It goes and does web search for these questions too, and then pulls the answers. By the way, that's how our market research tool works. Basically, it just keeps reading, then does new research and so forth. Yeah.
So like what you're describing with like just extracting.
Yeah, it reads. That's not exactly Monte Carlo, but at least let's say reading stuff and deciding what are 3 interesting things to research further, and then research this. In this case, I think what they use for Monte Carlo is ranking. You have 5 options, rank them, and choose one and go to the next stage. So let's see. Investment idea 2. Invest in a specific e-commerce company will generate significant returns due to a shift in consumer spending habits favoring online retail post-pandemic. This is also another learning. We should have limited the time period of the Google search. Google might have shown it, right? Domestic production, there's a lot of stuff on tariff. There's invest in companies involved in construction of starter homes, affordable housing. Some random Deloitte pages. Aswat Damadoran, this guy used to be the god when you're learning financial modeling and valuation. He's an NYU professor, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Maybe one weakness of what we did here right now is there's no dates. I think we forgot about that. You need to pass the dates to the AI. You gotta say today is 2024 December. This is
Uh,
the date of the news, and that will change how it analyzes because then it will realize that some of the forecasts made in the news are not relevant. It's in the
right.
past. The time has already passed. Okay. So when it's doing that, let's do the next step. I think the next step, what I want to do it is, let's do rank ideas filter. Okay. So now we already have the Gemini prompt. So we'll do limited work actually. I'm gonna just improve the model we use. I'm gonna say do the following changes. Go to tree news to idea folder, get 5 text files at each time and pass them to the prompt as content. These are investment ideas pieces, and goal of the LLM is to review them and think through them. Let's see the logic and decide on one idea that is really good to investigate further. I'm gonna add the date. Today is 2024 December, so keep that in mind in reading the notes. Some of them. What else to focus on? And let's say, make sure there's a specific thesis theme, not just invest in good companies. That's terrible. We are doing very fast, but if you show examples of how other hedge fund analysts think, it would improve the results a lot. I'm not public markets too, so I'm not so familiar, but if I were to show examples of how it would do better.
For instance, if you took an analyst report publicly available, it'd be like, hey,
Totally. They call it few shot prompting. There
right.
was like some papers that show this is like now the market moves so fast. When you did few shot prompting and in context learning to ChatGPT 3.5, it was performing as good as ChatGPT 4. So the more examples you show, the more, let's say, background info context you give to the AI, the more it can navigate its, let's say.
Right.
So right now, what we are doing is very raw. The previous step just finished, and the results, ranked ideas, batch. I think I can run this right away because the code is very similar. So let's see where this will save. So it took 5 files from here, and we created a folder called 4 ranked ideas. So it's going to read all 5 ideas from the previous step and create one. Let's look at this. Short the Invesco S&P 500 Momentum ETF due to overvaluation of its constituent high momentum stocks and potential for a market correction driven by a lost momentum. Interesting. Much of the year's market performance will likely be realized. The thesis focusing on shorting SPMO directly addresses potential overvaluation and unsustainable momentum. Interesting.
It's pretty precise.
We gotta, of course, verify it. So that's the next step. You gotta go and research this ETF more, but risk the thesis. The momentum driving these stocks could persist longer than anticipated, leading to further gains. Despite the overvaluation, a short squeeze is possible if positive news or strong earnings surprises emerge for the key components of SPMO. Market volatility. I'm not so familiar with this ETF, so I cannot comment much. Invest in the Invesco S&P 500 low volatility ETF. Interesting. Capitalize on investment, reduce portfolio risk amid persistent market uncertainty stemming from Federal Reserve policy, geopolitical instability. So it generally gave ETF level ideas.
They're pretty precise relative to the kind of what we were looking at before.
I'm very bullish on this. Instead of using RAG, I think you gotta just pre-process the output of LLM 20 times before you see it. So imagine this. If I showed to a user, they would say this is bullshit and close the website. But if I show this, maybe they look at a second. And if we do this another 40 minutes, I'm pretty sure we can create a table of all the ideas and show what is supporting this and that.
Yeah, at a later date, we can do that because we can do like a dummy portfolio. Just plug it in, see how it does.
Yep. But this one is related to what you said. Short selling companies that unexpectedly delay their fourth quarter earnings announcements, particularly those in industries with less stringent regulatory oversight. And I never read about that before. I don't know if it is valid or not, but the domain expertise is so important. If a public market investor here sitting with us, he could have said, guys, this is BS. I think domain expertise still matters because how do you evaluate? I did investing, but I'm not a public markets guy. How do you evaluate whether this is solid enough?
That's what I like about it. It's like, for me, it's like I'll It's like you're talking to someone else almost, right? Like you like
Yeah, totally.
it's not like you're it's like another point of view. Great. Yeah, obviously we've run into bugs and whatnot, but it does help you think about
Once you set it up, the initial flow. Also, I hate like JSON stuff. Honestly, LLMs are really low reliable. Reliability is really low when it comes to processing JSONs.
didn't Altman talk about that?
Guy who is in the board of OpenAI and who created their startup called Sierra, they do customer service. For instance, I think they had a paper saying that the function calling is only 70%, 80% successful. Diving deeper into that, function calling basically means you get a structured input, structured output, and that's generally JSONs, not text. Right? For function to understand, you always do basically almost like an API call. JSON, they add small ticks to the end, they change JSON like objects and so forth. It's very hard, but I think it will be fixed. And when it's fixed, you have unlimited agentic behavior. It will be smooth. There will not be an issue.
Actually, yeah, before jumping on this call, I saw like somebody written about someone doing community board meetings
Hmm.
and like recording those and then summarizing those because it's like real estate, right? Like all those towns deciding on where they're going to put buildings and whatnot. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, that's we can do that totally. So we have, I think what I'm gonna do is we ranked all of these. So
okay,
I'm gonna rank them one more time.
okay,
Okay. Let's see, because each time it's looking at five. So we already got the good fives from the previous 50, and now we have 15, 13. And I'm gonna have AI look at them as well. So I'm gonna rank one more time. Maybe this time, let's use this new Gemini model. Let's see. Overview. I like Gemini experimental pretty much. It's a pretty good model.
And when you're back and forth with a lot of these, what are the pros and cons of each?
Anthropic Sonnet 3.5 is amazing at coding. I use it a lot, as you can see here. But I've been also starting using Gemini Experimental 1206. They give fast answers and you just feel it. It solves the problems. I think O1 is pretty good. O1 meaning I use a lot because I don't like waiting till O1 preview. The reason is it does all the work for you, then you don't understand at all. Not that I'm incredibly good at it. Just it writes everything. It's like a huge script written. Obviously,
Right,
I'm late. I'm not going to read all of it. So I don't know what it did, to be honest. At
right,
least Sonnet and Gemini, they write a specific part, as you can see. It's easier for me to understand what changed in the code. By the way,
right.
there's another tool called Windsurf. We can use it, let's say, I don't know, this tool. It writes the full code for you, but it keeps talking on the side that I don't do anything, basically. And it's hard for me to understand what it did. For some reason, I don't enjoy that yet, but some people in our team use it a lot if you want to check it. Other than that, Gemini, Anthropic, Sonnet, all have a space. And if you pay attention, I use Gemini a lot here because it's very cheap. They are
Yeah,
very competitive in pricing.
yeah.
So I use them in tasks. When I'm finding a product, I may use Sonnet 3.5 in some locations. I just find O1 series not suitable for production because it's expensive and takes so much time.
Latency. Yeah.
10 seconds.
What's your sense of like where the cost is going? It's going to zero. It is wild. That's where it's crazy because it's like all the infrastructure for this stuff was like by accident, right? Transformers in general was
Total
by
zero.
accident.
I'm super bullish. I think, dude, amount of tokens we all will consume will be crazy. If it is just few cents, why not spend it? I
Right.
think every person will have maybe 5 agents like this coding for them in 10 years. In that world, there is unlimited demand for inference, not just pre-training, and cost will go down. The only issue is maybe the energy
Right.
prices on catch up, or there's some issues. If AI and LLM power, like the pricing stays at this level, most of the white collar work will be automated anyways with enough engineers.
That's the weird thing about all this stock. Why is it such a big deal? If everything stopped getting better today, it's already amazing.
Incredible
Yeah.
development. And I think on that topic, I'm gonna use Gemini 2 Flash, second ranked ideas. Scaling, pre-training, I think it got really hard because building bigger and bigger clusters, data centers is really hard. I think Elon Musk is trying to do a big one, but the innovation they are focusing on the inference side. O1
Right.
is an inference side too. Test time, compute, they call it. So they are finding ways. You can get stuck on the scaling part, but there's so many smart people focusing on this. I think
Right.
we will find a way to make it cheaper.
And plus, isn't Nvidia's margins like 70%? It's
So
like that's not gonna last forever.
Google is pushing their own production. Even Amazon is pushing. They are not gonna just keep paying Nvidia.
Right.
I don't. But I have to say, I was just watching a documentary on this business today. I
Which
think it's. I saw one on CNBC. They were talking
which
about
business?
The fab, like the
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
semiconductors. It's the modes there are quite protective. It's not easy to replicate it. China is trying a lot apparently. Like
Hmm.
it's not that easy to replicate the chip technology. So I don't know how quickly these guys can enter, basically, is my point.
But those chips were meant for video games, right? If we're now using this technology to build chips for this purpose.
Some people want to create their customized version. Google is doing some stuff there. It's not my domain, but on my only perception is it's getting cheaper and cheaper. And there's very good open source models. Did you see that? Like, for instance, Llama 3.3, 70 billion performs as good as Llama 3.1, 405 billion. So you have
Wow.
a model that is almost 5 times, six
That's
times
big.
smaller, performs the same.
It's
So
wild.
clearly the things are going towards smaller models performing much better. And that's why I believe I'm so bullish on this. Imagine the tokens are free. Just assume that the tokens, the words are free. In that world, how would you design the organization? I think you would just have dozens of AI constantly reading, understanding everything over and over again, and then giving you ideas. I think that's what will happen. This is the second layer of filtering. We are looking at the ones that were filtered, and let's see how it comes. And I'm also using Gemini 2 Flash. It's a faster model. Let's see if it is good. So, invest in companies that provide alternate housing solutions, modular housing, co-living spaces, multifamily rentals will benefit from the ongoing housing crisis.
Oh God.
This thesis stands out as the most compelling for December 24 because it addresses a deep-seated structural issue with strong long-term tailwinds rather than relying on short-term market timing. It's not dependent on predicting specific macroeconomic events. This is not bad in terms of choosing a market to look at, actually, as
Right.
a macro thesis.
It was just a story because there's not supply. Wall Street, private equity has bought a ton of
Yeah. They did.
single family houses.
Conduct true due diligence on companies with alternative housing. Look for firms. Okay. So, for instance, the next step we need to do is there's now 3 ideas, which is cool. You need to go to web again. And now you need to search. So I will create another agent. We are coming close to our time, but let's read the ideas. Interest rate rebound in traditional home ownership. These are the risks. A rapid reversal of current high interest rates combined with significantly lower home prices could incentivize a shift back towards traditional home ownership. Okay. Construction cost inflation, slower than expected consumer adoption could be. Let's look at the next idea. Durable goods domestically, anticipating increased demand due to front loading before the implementation of tariffs in 2026. It's a good thesis. Like always, whenever there's a tariff, they buy ahead of time.
Right.
Front loading of imports. With the 2026 tariffs looming, there's a significant incentive. So not a bad idea. I think other people can comment too, and this short the index by S&P 500 momentum due to overvaluation of its constituent high momentum. The ideas here now are based on the news it read. Obviously, you should never just trust single news, right? So I think what I would do next is I'm going to create another, let's say, step. I'm going to call it 6 research. In this one, we will look at these 3 ideas we generated. And for each idea, we are going to create 20 questions to go to Google and go deeper. Let's do this. Read the thesis and generate 20 questions to research the idea on Google. We need to find companies for and against idea and perspective. This is the idea thesis. Let's just create the questions. Take a single text file from our input folder, pass it as thesis to the prompt, and ask LLM to generate 30 questions to truly investigate the idea. Save the results as text file. Wait for all text files in the input folder. This will help us go another layer. And after the another layer, the questions comes, we go to web again, we research, we save again. At that point, we will try to substantiate the ideas because you cannot just go with the idea that LLM has given right away. Once you set up the LLM flow, it's rather easy to play with it. So now I have 30 questions here.
Right.
What are the current price to earnings ratios of the top holdings in the Invesco? We have P ratios. How have the P ratios of these S1 holdings cleared? What are the specific proposed tariffs scheduled for 2026 that are driving this investment thesis? We have to improve one thing. It doesn't give information about the investment thesis. The Google search wouldn't do as well. I need to change the prompt a little bit. So let's come here. Thesis, just a question in line. These questions, go to Google, just ask the questions in a way that we get find links and articles, PDFs that can help us validate the thesis. We have 10 minutes left. We can maybe talk more about what we did here.
Actually, one thing too is like what you were talking about earlier, about like 10 years, how things are going to be. I feel like coding now is easier than it was because of the kind of help. So for somebody getting used to or trying to think about this, what would you recommend? Because you're self-taught.
And obviously I'm not a professional software engineer, but I can at least create the flows to know if something is possible or not. That helps so much because the other part of the problem is engineers don't understand how to look at the domain. I think it's important for business people to code a little bit, and it's getting much easier. The way I learned is I finished Code Academy class, like CS track, and I took the Replit 100-day course. Replit is pretty cool, I think, for iterating. It's very gamified. They have a UI, you can deploy it right away, see it working. It's pretty cool, I think. And once I did it in Replit, at some point I realized I can code a little bit more, and I started building tools.
Yeah. Sounds like me learning Italian. I have this Gamify app, so things start to click after a while.
I used to create GPTs to learn Vietnamese. My wife is Vietnamese and I still live there. Like I would talk with the GPT on Vietnamese. It's pretty good actually. I think it's better.
So what would you do? How would you structure it? So it's like different than Google Translate, which is what I use.
I used ChatGPT only at the time, and I would just basically I created a chatbot for myself. I wake up and I say good morning. How's Chao Sung Bai or Chao Bui Sung, and then I tell it to basically respond in Vietnamese. But after its response, tell what I did wrong in the way I wrote. So I was just talking with it, but each time I talk, I would get the feedback as well. Like I had Duolingo. That's how I learned Vietnamese much better. Not that I speak much right now, but that was the impressive point. I was able to say a few words and so forth.
Got it. Yeah, no, that's fun. I should try that out.
Yeah. So I'll take you here. Let's look at the flow we created. Wait, where is that? Excel drove. Okay. So we managed to we started here. We actually didn't do a list of companies because the news didn't give a list of companies. Probably this will need to be done much later, to be honest. But we created a lot of ideas, and then we started filtering the ideas, and we are at the point. So we decided that we will do another research before looking at specific companies, right? We said iteratively filter ideas, yeah. And then we also did additional search again, questions to search again. We are at this step. And then we will search again, basically. Go to Google again. Once you do that a couple of more times, you will validate the ideas more, and then you can focus on specific companies. This step we didn't do yet. I'm gonna pull it up.
It's interesting because like now, say you have a position or you're traded, and then you could be like, hey, what should I be thinking about? Like what's changed if you're adding like...
I think the cool part is once you build this, and honestly, if I spend, I think 3 days fully coding this with the help of AI, you would have something working for you.
And it's not half bad.
One clarification, what I'm building is far from a product, of course. You can make it run locally on the code base manually. That's easy. I think you can do it quickly. But if you want to turn it into a product with a database, it works smoothly. That's a lot of continuing work. So I respect that. That will take time. But prototyping and testing if something is viable, you can do it.
But the whole point of this was to be like, hey, what could this be? Because it seems to be the status quo right now is that agents are going to 2025 is all about it.
The agent has to combine few steps. For instance, you'll have an agent here, and the agent will basically be able to call these functions. Knows what function to call.
Right.
That's an agent, the one who can decide what to do next. Right now, we just created the flow.
Right, just some APIs.
Exactly. And ideally, you have these functions, and agent knows which functions to call. There will be a definition of each function. If somebody's looking for researching the market, I call the one that does the web search. If somebody's looking to create the ideas, I call the one that is doing the testing, that looks at the database results they generated in the previous step, and so forth.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. Ata, thanks a lot. We'll
My
get more
pleasure.
more to talk, more to do in the new year.